So you just fuss with the microphone, and that gets everybody's attention. So, welcome to an absolutely wonderful concert this afternoon. I'm Sue Hassler. I'm the president here at Muskingum. And I'm going to ask you to bear with me for a little bit longer introduction today because I have a small story to tell. So in the fall of 2016, I was brand new at Muskingum, and I was invited, my husband Ken and I were invited to visit with Senator and Annie Glenn in Columbus. We were supposed to have a 30-minute meeting. It was a 90-minute meeting. And Senator Glenn had pages on a legal pad of things that he wanted to share with me that would be important to Muskingum's future. And his passion about public service, his passion about the impact of an education of a place like Muskingum was absolutely palpable and very inspiring. We had an opportunity to talk to Annie Castor Glenn as well and hear her story and the power of both of them and the ways that they served in so many important ways. So you fast forward just a bit that fall, I was talking with Janice McLeod, and I have to see if she's in the audience. You got to wave here, Janice. See, oh, excellent. Janice and I were working together at that time, and we realized that it was coming on the 75th anniversary of the attack on Pearl Harbor, which had had a powerful impact on the Glens. Many of you know the story, that John actually was driving, heard about the attack. Annie was doing her senior recital right here in Brown Chapel. He waited until that recital was finished and then shared with her that he had decided to join the armed forces. And so this was an incredibly powerful moment for them. So on December 8th, because we happened to have a chapel hour on the 8th, we had a memorial service for those who had served in World War II, honoring those who had served, as well as remembering those who were lost in Pearl Harbor and other areas of the conflict. It was a very moving service. And one of the things we emphasized, of course, was the John and Annie Glenn story. We played Finlandia from her concert. But very, very meaningfully, at the end, we did the echoing taps. And the echoing taps were what John and his father would play on Memorial Day in the New Concord Cemetery. And in the echoing taps, one person stands in the front, one person stands at a distance. And so we had two students play at that time, one of whom is here as an alum, Brandon Barnes. And we also had Gabriel Wheeldryer. And the two of them, about 12:10, were playing the echoing taps on December 8. And Senator John Glenn passed from this life to the next just a few minutes after that on December 8. And so that story, that legacy, that livacy and that legacy has stayed with me in my entire time here at Muskingum, because it speaks to the power of a place like Muskingum, not only to ground the students who come here, but also to really equip our students to soar, to serve the world, to go out and make a huge difference. And in my 10 years here, I have met amazing current students, but also amazing alumni, amazing friends of this institution, all of whom I believe are part of that legacy of service that John and Annie Glenn both lived and articulated so well. So I welcome you this afternoon. David's going to talk a little bit about the origins of this particular concert, but I welcome you to a wonderful concert. Godspeed, John Glenn.
Thank you very much, and welcome to this afternoon's presentation of Godspeed John Glenn. In memoriam of John Glenn in the 10th year of his passing in 2016. Our program tonight includes music from the different facets of John Glenn's life. And we started with Rambunctious piece that was commissioned for the President's Own Marine Band. And in fact, you might have heard some snippets of the Marines hymn in there. The concert tonight, also some of the pieces, actually the cornerstone is a work that we commissioned, and we're going to talk a lot more about that later. It's called Godspeed John Glenn, but that project in 2017 is when it started, precipitated a departmental-wide concert to celebrate the life and legacy of John Glenn. And some of the pieces tonight are from that. The first one, that's the way we open the concert, and then we're going to close our concert with the same two pieces. So we hope you enjoyed that, and we hope you enjoy hearing a little story about John Glenn and his legacy. And I having grown up in Ohio, of course, I know who John Glenn is and was. When I got the job here in 2010, I told my classmates in doctoral school where I was employed now. And of course, nobody knows, this was in Michigan, nobody knows where New Concord is, or Muskingum University. I said, well, that's where John Glenn's from. Do you know what question I got? Who's John Glenn? So for me, and of course, mind you, I was in doctoral school way older than most people, so they were younger than me, so they got an education from me about who John Glenn was. So onward, the next piece is Frank Ticheli's Simple Gifts, Four Shaker Songs. And this is just a really beautiful, pretty piece that kind of reflects the simplicity, humility, and sense of place associated, what I associate with rural southeastern Ohio, values that shaped John Glenn's early life for sure. Conducting today is Keely Carter. She's a junior music education major from West Lafayette, Ohio. She graduated from Ridgewood High School. She'll conduct tonight as part of the requirements for conducting Music 372. Our students were really fortunate to give our students these experiential learning opportunities to take their coursework. Of course, this is a hands-on class, and actually do it with live musicians and a performance. And she's really excited. She's done terrific work with the ensemble, and is excited to be here tonight. And please welcome her, Keely Carter, to the podium. The next work also draws from John Glenn's military service, Eagle Squadron March, composed in 1942 to honor the World War II Eagle Squadron. So these are a group of American pilots who joined the British Royal Air Force in 1940 before the U.S. entered the war. This was written by Kenneth Alford, who was generally considered British's March King. Conducting Eagle Squadron is Eric Shields. Eric is the principal horn of the Muskingum Valley Symphonic Winds, is active in the region, performing in all bands and orchestras. He's also a decorated Marine Corps musician, so it was only fitting to have him guest conduct. So please welcome Eric Shields, a Zanesville native, to the stage to conduct Eagle Squadron March.
How many folks followed the Artemis II mission that just successfully was done a couple weeks ago? It seems really timely that we're celebrating John Glenn in the space portion of his life right after that. You know, we could have talked to NASA and maybe we could have had the splashdown on the day of the concert. Wouldn't that have been cool to do that? But anyway, it's really, I followed it. I was not, I was alive during some of the earlier moon missions, but I was enraptured by all of it. So the last piece and the next piece are a nod to his space travel. That was called Orbital, and it wasn't written for space per se, but just anything that orbits. You heard a lot of frenetic energy there, something that orbits a planet or an electron, well, the science things. When we think about, we shared with the ensemble about how now we're pretty certain we can bring people back when we send them into space, but in 1962, I don't know that we really knew for sure. You know, and that just, I heard Glenn Schuck, who we're going to hear from later, talk about that and how monumental that was. So anyway, this was Orbital by Adrian Sims. So John Glenn's orbited the Earth February 20th, 1962, lasted 5 hours, and included a total of 3 trips around the Earth. And in each of those trips, he would have seen the sunrise. And some of us saw some magnificent photos recently from space of the Earth and the Moon. So this piece is not written with space at all in mind. It has a whole different background, but we chose it for the title, The Sun Will Rise Again. This is just a beautiful chorale work that to me captures the beauty of seeing a sunrise, particularly from space.
Okay, so the next musical work you'll hear is the piece that we had commissioned in 2017, Godspeed John Glenn. And after his passing in January, it was fairly quickly that I asked to meet with the president to say, hey, this is what we do in music to honor somebody of such importance. We commissioned a work. Let's get a piece written, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later too. But lots of care went into choosing just the right composer, and had to be the right, something that fit our ensembles. Ideally, you get a super top name composer so everybody hears about your piece, and sometimes that doesn't happen. Sometimes you commission a work and it's like you perform it and then maybe it didn't get performed ever again. So a lot of care, and I reached out to some colleagues, and one of my colleagues that is no longer with us, she was a band director colleague throughout Ohio. We were chatting about composers we could choose or select, and Ryan Allen's name came up for a lot of reasons. He's an Ohio native. He's from Northeast Ohio. He taught public school for a while. He's currently, at the time he was the assistant director of the President's Own Marine Band. He's now the director of the President's Own Marine Band. And he's a composer. He's a pretty prolific composer and has done a lot of works. And I thought, just knowing his music, that something in his musical style would be awesome for this. So, reached out to him. He said he was not taking commissions at the time, but he said he felt he needed to do this. He talked about the Marine Band's, one of their prized possessions, I learned in a conversation with him, was the CD of music that John Glenn took with him into space in 1998, I think, the Space Shuttle Discovery. And so then a friendship was formed, so to speak. He wrote this piece for us. We premiered it on the concert in 2018 with the Muskingum Wind Ensemble, and we've done it one time since, and it's full, and then sometimes we do truncated versions of it, like a John Glenn's 100th birthday celebration in Concord. We got special permission to perform like a fanfare version that he put together for a presidential flyover. We got special permission. I thought that was pretty cool. Anyway, I remember talking to the composer. He envisioned a work that reflects Glenn's lifelong commitment to God, family, and country. And in Muskingum, we know him through his public service also. So throughout the piece, you'll hear solo instruments that serve as a subtle nod to instruments played by John and Amy Glenn. There are trumpet solos throughout, and President Hassler referenced him playing taps with his dad. There's some trombone solo, and Annie's second instrument was trombone. So that is featured prominently. There are many moments of chamber-like writing, music for smaller forces, and Ryan equated that to the importance of family in his life. And then President Hassler also mentioned Finlandia, the hymn "Be Still My Soul." He weaved that into the piece, really a full statement at the big climax of the piece, because he thought that was important. He immersed himself in the project immensely. I think by the time I talked to him, he had read his memoir completely, so that he really knew. And just to get somebody who took that kind of care. And a side note, I didn't know Ryan. I had seen him conduct. He conducted a band I was in once. But when the Wind Ensemble went on a trip to D.C. and we were going to be there, I reached out to him. Is there anything we can see? He hosted us at the National Cathedral to hear a rehearsal of the Marine Band Chamber Orchestra they were doing a Veterans Day service. So he's just an amazing human being, too. Great composer, great musician. He conducted the Ohio All-State Band at our OMEA conference a few years back, and he programmed this piece, and it was really special, and he gave me the biggest hug. So anyway, for us, it's a special piece, and I'm glad I was interviewed by WHIZ, and part of the cool part of this was bringing this to a different generation. We've had new Muskies and new community, so we're really excited to perform this for you today. As an introduction, you're going to hear an excerpt from Glenn's memoir that was played at the original John Glenn tribute concert. And this is read by guest narrator Glenn Schuck, who was actually here on campus Friday meeting with the John and Amy Glenn Public Service Fellows. I met with them all day, and then he gave a little talk, and I went to meet him. it took me a while to get his connection to Muskingum. He's kind of adopted us, it seems like. He's from the East, Seton Hall University. He is an anchor reporter for 1010 Winds, as he calls it, in New York City, top-rated radio station in the country for news, and was the first reporter at Ground Zero at 9/11. And he shared a lot of pictures and such with us. So I reached out to him upon a suggestion from a colleague, Tom Gurman. Minutes later, he said, yes, I'll do it, it'll be great. So he recorded this and sent it to us. So, and he's been to campus several times. I learned this morning that he'll be here again in late September. So anyway, we are really proud to share John Glenn's words alongside Ryan Nowlin's powerful musical tribute.
Patriotism filled the air of New Concord, the small eastern Ohio town where I grew up. Memorial Day, the 4th of July, and Armistice Day were flag-waving holidays and parades and salutes to the United States and to the soldiers, living and dead, who had fought for freedom and democracy. Now at home in those patriotic days that I remember, my father was called upon to play the bugle. He marched in the parade formations when the local veterans from the 37th Ohio Division marched on down Main Street on Armistice Day and played the colors when they raised the flag at the American Legion Hall, right at the end of the parade. But the bugling I remember best was the taps he played on Memorial Day. It was still called Decoration Day then, and families dressed in their Sunday best would regather at the town cemetery after the parade, carrying bundles of gladioli and irises, red, white, and blue, the dominating colors. And the marching soldiers presented arms and fired 3 volleys in salute as the flags flanking the stars and stripes were dipped. Then my father raised his war-battered brass bugle and played those drawn-out, mournful notes in memory of the soldiers killed in action, and the sound drifted across the gravestone and sent chills up my spine. We had a town band in New Concord. I was 9 or 10 when I joined the band and learned to play the trumpet. Now at home, Dad taught me the military calls, and one day, after I learned to play them well enough, he came to me with a request. "Bud," he said, "Decoration Day's coming up, and I want you to play taps with me." Dad and I practiced at home as the end of May approached. He played in the kitchen, and I stood in another room, and when the day came, I was a little scared. I went alone to the cemetery ahead of the others. I walked across the sloping grounds and waited out of sight in the woods where the terrain fell way beyond the graves. Soon I heard, "Present arms," as the soldiers' honor guard reformed. Peeking through the leaves, I saw them raise their guns to fire the 3 volleys in salute. Then my father lifted his bugle, and the first sad notes rose in the spring air. The first phase ended, and I was ready. I put the trumpet to my lips and echoed the clear notes. We played through taps like that, my trumpet echoing his bugle phrase by phrase until the last notes died. That really impressed me then as a boy, and echo taps still give me the chills. It recalls the patriotic feeling of New Concord, the pride and respect everyone in the town felt for the United States of America. Love of country was a given. Defense of its ideals was an obligation. The opportunity to join its guests in explorations was a challenge not only to fulfill a sacred duty, but to join a joyous adventure. I expect the future to bring new rewards and challenges, and as always, going forward requires touchstones in the past. My parents' legacy was honest, hard work, sweat and dirt, effort, and the grasp of opportunity. They believed in themselves and in their country, and they had faith in God. That legacy has been my guide through all the places I've been and all the things I've been fortunate enough to do, and I've tried to pass it along. For years now, I've kept one of Dad's plumbing wrenches right on my desk. It's an 8-inch wrench. It's steel heavy and darkened with oil and age. I keep it there as a reminder of just where and what I came from. That wrench tells me all I need to know about myself and about the country that I love.
So what President Hassler mentioned in her welcome is the meaning of John Glenn to her time here at Muskingum. If you are not from our community, you will know that she is retiring at the end of this year after 10 years of service. So we're going to make a presentation here from the bands and the winds, all the instrumental area. And there's a departmental thing happening too, but we're still waiting on that, and it will come. But since we're here for John Glenn, she mentioned so when we started planning this program, we worked on programming. She loaned us some artifacts from her office that we have here. Please enjoy the reception afterwards. We've got some things from the John A. England Museum and from the President's office. She mentioned this picture that she loves. She mentioned taps with Brandon playing taps with the stained glass. And to be honest, I don't know where he was that they got that picture. Anyway, I was there, but I don't remember. So we have framed this picture, a life-size part of this picture. Hopefully with trash bag in case it rained today. I actually wanted to hide it. It reads, presented to President Susan S. Hassler in recognition of your generous support in commissioning Godspeed John Glenn, a lasting tribute to a life of service, extraordinary achievement, and enduring inspiration in today's date. And I should note, when I went to her office, my plan, this happens in the wind band commissioning world, you usually need a consortium of schools to go in on a work. It's not cheap to do this. And she said, let's do this ourselves. So it's just us as the commissioning body of that work, that beautiful work. So for everything that you've done for this piece, the department, she's at all of our concerts. When she's in town, she's truly an avid supporter of music here.
Of musicians that we have here today. One of the privileges of my decade here at Muskingum has been the ability and the honor of being present at so many of these exceptional musical events. And what I love about this group is that it is a combination of our students, some alumni, community members, led by one of our highly esteemed and talented faculty. And it's such an amazing example of what we all do together. So this has been an incredible privilege, and I want to thank you. And thank you all for a beautiful, beautiful concert.
So we have a couple of musical selections left, but before we do that, I have a fairly lengthy list of acknowledgments and thank yous to make this. This is very much a collaborative spirit. This is, both of our concerts this semester have combined both the student wind ensemble and the symphonic winds. And you can see in the program if they're an alum or if they're a student, their graduation years are listed. So I want to just go down a list here. Hope Neal, the assistant, I think she might be here today. Hope Neal from she's the assistant director, soon to be executive director of the John A. England Museum, for sharing her artifacts with us and information. Thank you so much. And courtesy of her, we have discount coupons in the program. Hope you're here, right? Somebody, thank you, Hope. Thanks. Tom German, we heard the sound today because Tom German hit play, but he also designed these posters for us, with some pictures that, like, here we have a ton of pictures. Our marketing department got me pictures really quickly when I said, hey, I'd like anything from 2016, 2018, and that afternoon I had a trove of them. It's fantastic. One of the legacies of John Glenn, his name is everywhere, his and Annie's name are everywhere, are the John and Annie Glenn Public Service Fellows. Kara Riggle, I think, is over there manning the the sensitive artifact table. I'd like to recognize her. She's one of the John and Annie Glenn Public Service Fellows and has jumped in and curated what we have here and created some display boards. Orbit Media, thank you for, this was a last minute request. Thanks for hosting or doing our live stream. And Troy Simmons also, he's a friend of Muskingum also for that. Can we thank all those folks for all their dedication? Symphonic Winds is a community organization that relies on some funding from outside sources. So we have, you'll see in your program a list of patrons and donors in the program. We thank them for their support this year and really throughout all the years. The Ohio Arts Council, we are made possible in part by investment in public funds from the Ohio Arts Council, which is a state agency that funds and supports quality arts experiences to strengthen Ohio communities culturally, educational, and economically. And if there was a time in which we needed to lean into the arts, it is right now in our history. So we really thank organizations such as that. A special thank you to the Adams Family Foundation for special funding for this concert and for the reception that we are going to have in a second. Finally, all the musicians on the stage, what a group. Sue kind of beat my thunder there for a second. I'm really blessed to share the stage with them and their artistry, and they're not just great musicians, but just amazing humans and people. This concert was earlier than it has been in the last couple of years, so there were lots of Greek week stuff happening in between. And let me shout out to whoever helped me tear down the stage in like 10 minutes, because there was a rehearsal right before and then after. But these folks too, they jump in, they do everything, and it's just a pleasure to be with them. And I want to give a special round of thanks to them. Conductors get the stand in front, stand on a box, and wave our arms. But it's them that really makes the music. Yeah, we guide and shape, but somebody said once, well, the baton doesn't make any sound. And you're right about that. All right, so we hope you can join us for reception. We purposely put it up here so it's convenient. You can interact with the artifacts and the displays. Invite you to look at the pictures, some really cool stuff there. The next concert of the Symphonic Wind and the Wind Ensemble folks that are in town. This also is the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence and the foundation or the founding of our country. So there's a ton of America 250 celebrations happening throughout the land. So this summer, July 11th, Saturday, as part of the New Concord's America 250, this group will play a concert at 8 o'clock that will lead right into the fireworks, which is going to be really fun. And then on Saturday, the last few years, Saturday, August 15th, the last few years, we have performed at the Salt Fork Arts and Crafts Festival. And it'll be the same program at both of those ish, with some of this music and then some other stuff. We're going to do some Gershwin and do some American music and just do a pops kind of concert. All right, lastly, before we return to the music, we invite you to take a moment to complete one of our requirements for the Ohio Arts Council is to find out from our audience, how are we doing? What can we do better? So we have old school and new school ways to do this. We got pencils, and we have the hard copies out in the foyer. We also have the QR codes, and we'll probably put that on our Facebook pages too. Please let us know if it's demographics and what you liked about the concert. Maybe there's a cool story you have, what brings you to the concerts, etc. So please take a moment to do that if you have a minute, and you don't have to do it today, or you can do it later also. Okay, we are ready to finish out today. Thank you so much for coming. We're going to close with highlighting the patriotism that John Glenn mentioned in his memoir. The lyrics for America the Beautiful were penned after Catherine Lee Bates summited Pikes Peak and observed how beautiful the natural beauty of our country is. And then we will follow that up directly with the official march of the United States Marine Corps, Semper Fidelis, which means always faithful, and considered by Sousa to be his finest march. So we hope you enjoy these last two selections, and thank you once again for being here today.